I'm Rebecca.
I am Asha. My idea for this is that we kind of do a totally biased review of a play that we have put up, a play that's in development. Maybe could you first talk a little bit about what Parley does, what a play in development is, in case.
That our playwrights meet for 2 hours a week, year round. And each week before the meeting, our playwrights prepare by reading all of the work that our colleagues have written and submitted in advance. And then when we get to our meeting, we discuss the writing work in detail. And so week by week, we talk about the playwriting work while it is in the process of being written. And so that is a part of development that I think is special about what we do, because we don't tend to start once the piece is written. Instead, we start with the idea and we go page by page. Most of us, if not all of us, kind of write intuitively. So we start, but we may not have a handle yet on what it is that even subconsciously, like what big idea we're exploring. And so the discussing helps us to get that clearer.
Right. And so that's what I think is special about Parley. Like typically in my experience, when you put a play up, you know, for its first read through, a bunch of actors are sitting in the room with the playwright reading it, and there's no audience, and there's not, you know, really costuming or sound or any of that fun stuff. But here, you know, we get the play to a done-ish place, and then it goes through rehearsal, and sound is added, and sometimes costumes and art or props. So, and then an audience is invited in. So not only do you get the chance to hear it, but you're seeing it with some blocking and stuff like that. And then an audience is seeing it too. So you get to see the audience reaction. So it's something that is like a little bit more than I think is offered by most developmental workshops.
I think that's true. In my experience, at least in the old days, you know, as the playwright, I was maybe not always welcome in rehearsal. So that's it's very different with us in that we want the writer to be in rehearsal. We want the writer to see the actors kind of grappling with the material, to be able to hear the questions that they ask, to be able to even make revisions along the way if that's something that, I don't know, comes up for them that they want to see. And that experience of being really intimately involved in the process of creating the performed piece helps the playwright to no end. It's so different than the way that we write, which is typically, I mean, we write on our own. Mm-hmm. And we come up with beautiful, sometimes things, and we hope, but how that translates to a piece of live theater is its own really lovely educational process. And since most new playwrights of new work don't get a lot of opportunities to share their work publicly, they miss out on all of the stuff that they could be learning.
Yeah, and that kind of falls really easily into the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is what we were trying to do with this experience. So like in your words, what was the intention in your mind for the BACCHIC RITES experience before the play?
Okay, so we're trying to determine what a piece of theater needs to be in order to make it worth putting pants on. Maybe you need to get someone to care for a family member. You need to leave home. You have to find a place to park. You have to, in many cases, pay the ticket price. And remember that we're talking about a new play here, and we're not talking about an established and lauded work of literary art. So what makes people come? And if it is entertainment or if it is distraction that I am looking for, then I can get that at home, exactly what I want at any time I want, and I can stop it and start it as often as I like, and I can have the snacks that I really like available to me, and then I don't even have to wear a mask to enjoy this kind of storytelling. Yeah, it could not be more convenient. And the amount of media, the amount of material could not be more abundant. But what I think right now theater needs to do, it is also about storytelling, but it's not about distracting the audience. It's about directing and focusing attention while existing in this physical proximity to other humans. So you're creating a kind of collective experience of meaning making. One really simple benchmark I would use sometimes is, would someone be even mildly interested in having a conversation about what they just experienced? That's, I think, what right now, what we're going for, and what we really played with Cowboys and the BACCHIC Rites, was just provoking a conversation to extend that theatrical experience beyond that, the literal or physical experience of taking it in.
I think that we had a lot of conversations while we were trying to organize it, and it was sort of because of the nature of the play and the content of the play. The BACCHIC Rites, I think, were kind of designed to invite the audience into the mind space of maybe what it would be like to be in the community that the play represented. So a sort of community that might be seen as a cult by outsiders, is or is not, TBD. I don't know. But, and then also to, do something active if they chose to, because we had the consent cards, and having a couple options for participation with dance and art was sort of like bringing people into the space of not only, things that we associate with communities that are often seen as cults, like a kind of meditative space, this like idea of an ideal community, and also being kind of pushed or invited into participation of things that are outside of your comfort zone. And often, one of the ways that people are like kind of baited into those communities is by this combination of being put into a place that's not comfortable with a lot of like really joyful language and nice sounds, and so that you get to experience kind of the fear that might be associated with being uncomfortable or embarrassment or something, but then you're immediately satisfied by the coming together of the community, which also happened as we led them straight into a play where they could sit, and they were given some juice.
And they got a little juice, a little grape juice.
Yeah, and then they got to be comfortable right away.
Right. There is, like, in the research that I did regarding cults, yes, and also religious sects, and also, the potential, that like human potential movement, of like exploring your personal power and your personal motivation, and how you go out and get stuff, right? There's this idea of a peak experience that happens when you are challenged. You're put in an uncomfortable position, but you're kind of put increasingly, like, I think that it is titrated, where you're just you only have to be a little bit uncomfortable each time. The challenge progressively increases of discomfort, but you are absorbing the rewards and I don't know if it's, euphoria. I mean, there is a rush of, I did it.
Yeah.
Like,
it's just like I painted a stick figure in front of all these people with like weird music.
I mean, that is high risk for a lot of us.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the result will be. You don't know if you're going to be asked to account for the thing that you made.
And that's a really great point. I think that even I've been painting in front of people in different ways and failing horribly because I'm too lazy to sketch my work first in front of people for like 20 years. But like, if I were asked to do that, I think I would be a little bit like, oh, like, what happens next? Like, what are you going to do with it? You know?
What are you going to do with it? And that happened too with the writing part, where you write your ideal community. And we had an incredible variety of responses, and we had near universal participation on that.
Yeah,
you know, but
consent cards. I think that was a successful way to show, I mean, and we'll find out, right, as more people give us their feedback, but I think that was a successful way to show like, hey, at any point, just turn that thing to red and you're good. So your risk is kind of reduced by your empowerment, which is
right.
anti-cult, right? Like we kind of added something to make everyone ground and like, we're actually just in Seattle in a theater right now. Like you're not, you know, you can play with this, but it's a play.
Right, it's a play.
Mm-hmm.
I heard back from a lot of people who were really jazzed at the idea of the consent cards, and were so happy that they could just take them along, use them in everyday life. They were like, I wish I could use them in everyday life. I was like, I think you can.
Yeah.
This is yours. Take it with you.
Yeah. It's one of those things that should stay. It's like masks and consent cards.
Yes.
All the gear we need for the future. Okay, so do you think that, like, overall, do you feel like the BACCHIC Rites part was successful?
It's really important to me that that when artists come together to collaborate with me on something that I've written, and this of course includes actors, but they're exploring their art through this initial piece of art that I made, right? I wrote a thing, and they're coming forward and offering to take that and then express themselves in a way that's meaningful to them. And I think that that's what happened. Mm-hmm. And those different artists might do things slightly differently, or might tweak, or might like, oh, next time I'll try this. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what I was hoping for, which is a kind of joyful, playful, thoughtful collaboration, that occurred.
Yeah, I really like how the sort of experimental, playful quality of the rites switched to something that was kind of, I can't think of the right word to describe it, but it was kind of, it was like a little bit darker. You know, when the actors were on stage and they were performing their ritual, it was very, you know, a little bit more fast paced, a little bit more intense. And then everyone is drinking their juice box, which, by the way, like I heard so many people laugh when they received
the
juice box.
Yes.
Which made me really happy. I don't know if that translates to other people's experience, but for me, like I that's what I wanted. Like I feel like we tend to forget when we go to plays that we are in a playful space. We're sort of bringing in playing like children do into an adult world.
I passed them out along with Drew for every performance, and there was surprise and delight.
Yes, it's like wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something we can kind of, you know, with these reviews, and I want to talk about that probably at the end. Like, I think it would be great to just inform people, like, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a space that's kind of immersive, but that is maybe only challenging to you in like a light way, but you can also consent to not be challenged. But it's also just like bring in like the delight of immersion.
Because that's different, right? Yeah. That you can't get with a subscription to Netflix.
Right. Okay. So from your perspective, and I think this is kind of like the meat of what I want to do with these things, what do you think was super, like when you were writing the play, you had an idea.
Yeah.
What matched when it came to life, and what like kind of maybe didn't match, or you're like, oh, you know, this part I would add a little more action to, or whatever, just anything that really stuck with you.
Right. Well, I think that the play, I was pleasantly surprised by how well the play read. So the pace of it really worked for me. The language, I think, mostly really worked. I was also pretty excited by the way that the separate movement-based rehearsals that we did with the ensemble, the way that that seemed to deepen their connection, so that, you know, there were these choral sections in the play to correspond to the choral element of the Bacchae by Euripides. And so that sort of ancient Greek chorus idea. But the timing of that, there are a lot of overlaps and simultaneous speaking in those choral odes. And that worked kind of like gangbusters. Like they really were able to move, breathing together in the way that they worked those speeches. And so what could have been maybe, I don't know, just like blah, like here's a section of poetry, blah. You know, wasn't that. I thought they felt active and interesting and things were happening, and there were funny parts, even in those odes. I really very much wanted to take these old bones from this very old classical Greek play that I only kind of liked, only a little bit, and to make it feel immediate and very relevant to right now. Mm-hmm. And I really thought, it did that. Mm-hmm. So I was really happy. And I also, my other big thing was to kind of challenge my own opinions of people who are drawn into extreme belief. Yeah. I wanted to kind of upend a simplified narrative of perpetrator and victim. Mm-hmm. I didn't want the people that were in this group to only be acted upon. So I really, really loved it, which is so great. Mm-hmm. Super. I think, you know, if we ever work on it again, it's going to be totally different, because once the actors are off book and they have all their lines memorized and we're rehearsing it as a complete play, it will never be that again. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of bittersweet, because that form is something that I don't ever see done. Mm-hmm. I don't ever see something being read and something being brought to life with that kind of richness and fun ever. Mm-hmm. And I like what we make when we do that. I don't know, we had a very kind of stripped down, lo-fi version of this performance with the BACCHIC rites and with the reading. And that's, I mean, that aesthetic is really close to my heart. Mm-hmm. So I love it. I wouldn't do it differently in that form. And if it were in another form, all I can tell you is that it would cost a lot more money.
Right. Yeah. I think that these kind of performances require that the audience use their imagination, which is another type of engagement that other theater doesn't always require, you know, and I think that that's really cool, because it can look as grand as you imagine it in your imagination, you know. Yes. And it also kind of requires, I didn't get to see it at all. I was just
turned the other way.
But I can say that I've memorized most of it, and for many weeks was just like saying things in my head about, you know, different parts of the play, like stuck with me like a song. But from my experience of it was just like that the actors put so much into their voice, and I think they would do that anyway, I assume, but because the play is kind of stripped down, it relies so much on that And that is like a big job for the actors, but it's also a big opportunity for them, and a really interesting opportunity for the audience, I think, to see like this is like the art all by itself.
Yes. Well, that's my favorite. I want to see the transformation. And I don't think for me, there's nothing more interesting than
Right.
seeing the artist work.
Mhm.
Whether someone is painting on a canvas upstage or whether someone is interpreting a role and all they have is their voice and a script and a tiny bit of blocking.
It's really cool for audiences to see that, because it's not traditionally, this stuff is just what the makers see. But I think that if people have a different expectation, and it's the invitation is so profound and it's so vulnerable, and if anybody, most people don't write, but if anybody goes to a creative writing class or a painting class for the first time, and you have to sit there and listen to people talk about your work, like even that is really vulnerable. So putting it on stage is like a big deal without all the spectacle to like buffer it up, and that's really special. That's why I wanted to do this, because I want people who come to know like, hey, we're like inviting you into this creative space, and like you get to create too, and also like, react to our creation so we can create more and better.
That's just fun.
It's so fun. And like when we sort of decided to do this, I didn't know what I was gonna paint up there, but like listening to the play, like I just allowed myself to listen to the play and just be completely in the play. I mean, I had like a couple of cues, but I didn't really need to be as engaged with the play as I was. And so I just started to paint what the play was demanding. Like if we're talking about growing stuff, I started to paint flowers. And if we're talking about things dying, I kind of moved away from the flowers and started to like just do weird random things. It became sort of like a reflection of the play itself, at the point when they're talking about, how he can grow anything anywhere. I was like painting a ton of things, like little parts of a ton of different things. It wasn't even really just like a decision. I'm just like, well, what are they talking, like what is this asking of me right now? And I think that's some of the coolest things.
Yeah, I love that. I think absolutely. I mean, that's the closest that I can imagine getting to the, I don't know, theatrical utopia that we all reach for, which is, it does connect us. We don't have to be the same and we don't have to feel the same about it, but it is connective. And that is something that is in short supply in this particular time.
Yeah. So I want to be respectful of your time, of course. Is there anything you want to say about Cowboys with Questions before we move into talking about what's coming up?
Well, all I want to say about Cowboys with Questions is what a total thrill it was to watch it come together, including watching you do your stuff, and our sound design got so wild and cool. Nelia Miller did that, and Catherine Jett did so much beautiful movement work with the ensemble, and those actors worked so hard and so joyfully on a really challenging piece, and they just went with it.
Oh my gosh, everything was so profound and so solid, and yeah. And I will put this out there, you can answer it if you want to, but everyone that I know who's seen the play has asked me one question. Why did we kill the goats?
That is an important question.
It's a good one to ask.
It's a great one to ask.
Yeah, that's usually what I say.
You might want to look up the Greek word for tragedy. I think that's one place to go. It turns out goats matter in just the Western theatrical tradition. We'll say that.
This thing that's coming up the soonest, I believe, is our festival of shorts.
Yes, Dirty Beasts. And that is coming up at West of Lenin. We are going to be, for the first time, instead of being on the main stage at West of Lenin, we are going to mount this in the upstairs rehearsal studio space, the 21st and the 22nd of October, both at 8:30 p.m.
So things that I would tell people if I were, trying to get them to come, is that we're going to have cool props. A bedazzler has been introduced. I would say that at least 3 of the pieces that I'm thinking of right now, maybe all of them, are very personal. So there's something like a solo performance or a dramatized memoir or something like that.
So there is a really strong first person storytelling motif. That makes you want to come to the show. A strong first person storytelling motif. There is that kind of wildness to these like young little beasties, that will wrap themselves around your face.
Yeah. And there's a vulnerability too. It's sort of like, this is sort of where a part of me has broken or where my heart has broken. Here you go. This is what it means to me.
And everyone should come.
Yes, everyone should come, and they should bring dates and then go down to Fremont and get some tacos. There's a taco truck nearby.
There is. It's a very good taco truck.
It's a good taco truck. We're like welcoming you into like very personal stories. So you don't have to watch Grey's Anatomy. You can just come. You can just come to the real world with our
Parley, Colin. You really don't have to watch Grey's Anatomy.